Civil rights groups slam the founder of Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg is accused of failing to tackle hate speech. Now, some of the world's biggest brands are snubbing the world's biggest social network. But will it make a difference? I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is the Facebook advertising boycott. It has billions of users and generates billions of dollars in revenue, most of which comes from advertising. But could that now be at risk? For years, the social media giant has been accused of not doing enough to combat hate speech. Now, hundreds of companies have joined a campaign to try and force change by hitting the platform where it hurts, its bottom line. Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and Starbucks are just some of the big brands that have stopped advertising on the platform. And as the campaign gains momentum, the site's share price is falling. So, could this pressure force Facebook to make changes, or are they just too big to fail? Natalie Pahonen reports.
Facebook is one of the most powerful social networks on the planet, and it's coming under mounting pressure to change how it handles hate speech and misinformation. Its US operations are at the center of a targeted advertising boycott organized by civil rights and activist groups. The Stop Hate for Profit campaign has been joined by more than 900 companies. They've pulled all ads from the platform this month, targeting Facebook's revenue stream to stop the spread of toxic speech. This isn't the first time Facebook has been called out for its content policies. But this campaign comes in the wake of protests over the killing of George Floyd, and at a time when calls for racial justice are gaining widespread media attention. Boycott organisers met with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and other officials earlier this week on Zoom. Afterwards, they said it was clear the company isn't ready to address the vitriolic hate on their platform, and that Facebook hadn't shown any firm commitments to respond to organisers' demands, like removing white supremacist groups. This week, the company published an external civil rights audit that was 2 years in the making. It found that the network's approach to civil rights remains too reactive and piecemeal, and that Facebook should be doing everything in its power to prevent its tools and algorithms from driving people towards self-reinforcing echo chambers of extremism, and that the company must recognise that failure to do so can have dangerous real-world consequences. Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg says the platform has to get better at finding and removing hateful content, and it would put some of the auditor's recommendations into practice. She also says the company is making changes, but it's not because of advertising pressure. The boycott has had a small downward effect on Facebook's share price, but it's unclear if it will be long-lasting. Ultimately, the power to push for major changes to the way the company operates and how it moderates speech rests with its founder.
I believe that we have two responsibilities: to remove content when it can cause real danger as effectively as we can, and to fight to uphold as wide of a definition of freedom of expression as possible, and to not allow the definition of what is considered dangerous to expand beyond what is absolutely necessary.
But when a platform is as influential and widespread as Facebook is, can there be any alternative than doing everything in its power to address hate speech? Natalie Pahonen, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now is Zach McElroy. He was a content moderator at Facebook, and he joins us from Tampa, Florida. Marcus Messner is the director of the Robertson School of Media and Culture at Virginia Commonwealth University. He's in Richmond, Virginia. And Glen Gilmore is a lawyer and social media strategist coming to us from Villalba, Italy. He was once ranked as a top 20 social media influencer by Forbes. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Glen, let's dive right into it. The debate and the criticism against Facebook for not doing enough to root out hate speech on its platform is almost as old as the platform itself. So far, very few changes have been made. But now that companies, most of the most notable companies in the world, have joined forces on the Stop Hate for Profit campaign and pulled their advertising from Facebook, do you think this boycott is now a game changer? This is the moment that will make Facebook rethink things?
I think that the boycott is indicative of the fact that this is a magic moment in world history. We want to see fundamental change that insists upon accountability, to stop racism, to stop bigotry, to stop hate. The boycott is telling Facebook that its users and its advertisers have had enough and want to see fundamental change. And so I think that we're going to see that change take place, even if there's reluctance on the part of Facebook to do it.
Marcus, what do you think? Is this boycott effective? Is this something that will make Facebook rethink its stance?
I think, as the boycott affects the bottom line for Facebook, it will definitely trigger some change within Facebook. We've seen the criticism, as you said, for years now, and after the 2016 election here in the United States, and there have been some efforts, but it hasn't really affected the business side of Facebook, and that's changing now. And so I think it has to be seen how the pressure on Facebook can be sustained, and how the movement that is driving that pressure right now can keep this topic front and center.
Zach, you were with Facebook, you worked at Facebook, are more than familiar with the criticism, the previous one, but certainly the current one. This all sounds very familiar, I'm sure, to you. Do you think indeed this time it's different than on previous occasions where the public and others have joined forces to criticize Facebook?
Well, certainly we're hearing about this more than any other time, but I think that the financial impact on Facebook this round is, at the end of the day, rather minuscule compared to their revenue at large. I think perhaps the optics of the situation will be what will force them to make some internal changes rather than the inherent, the initial impact of the money that's lost.
Indeed, and if we look at the figures, Zach, it does support your thesis. Most of Facebook's revenue does come from small and medium-sized businesses. The highest spending brands accounted for $4 billion in advertising in 2019. That sounds impressive on paper, but only amounted to 6% of Facebook's ad revenue overall. So financially, Zach, this is not really a big hit and big loss for Facebook, is it?
Oh, certainly not. Like I said, I think the optics of the situation will be what will make them cave to the ADL and the SPLC, et cetera.
Glenn, if we look at the figures, certainly also supported by Zach, this is more a reputational damage and threat to Facebook rather than a financial one, isn't it?
It is, but at this particular moment in world history, that reputational damage can be fatal even to a giant such as Facebook, because I think ultimately we're going to see others join this boycott that will go far beyond the large brand you're seeing and go to the smaller brands, because customers and people everywhere are going to insist upon it and insist upon institutional change. That's the moment we're in right now.
Indeed, a very sensitive moment in time and an election year, of course, in the United States, Marcus. Much of the outrage fueling the boycott comes mainly from controversial posts by U.S. President Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, the boycott started with Facebook's refusal to remove a post from President Trump, which said, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts," in reference to protests following the killing of George Floyd. Twitter had labeled the same tweet as inflammatory and has also flagged other Donald Trump tweets as misleading. Is Facebook missing the boat here? Is not reading the room correctly?
Facebook is in a really tough spot with this as well. And as you've seen, Twitter has taken some action on the social media posts of the president, and the backlash on that has been huge. And so if Facebook moderates political speech in this current situation, there's also the danger for the company that the Trump supporters, which are strongly standing behind him, that they will turn their back on Facebook, and that they will get under pressure from that side. That said, at the same time, Facebook is long overdue doing something seriously about hate speech, and needs to find a way to balance freedom of speech, which is of course held very highly here in the United States, and civil rights and reliable information.
Zach, when confronted with the posts of Donald Trump, Mark Zuckerberg said, "We don't want to, police political speech." He says, "quote, Facebook shouldn't be the arbiter of truth of everything that people say online." Is he correct?
Well, that statement is correct. I don't think that it's what they act on all the time. I'll say, though, I think it's important to note that the issue of censoring Donald Trump's posts is not something that has been an issue up until now. And, frankly, is not, with respect to the president, it's not the primary issue at hand with censorship on the platform. Most of the censorship is done against the average private citizen. I think their policies are very horribly skewed in one direction. And I think that in the intro video, we actually just saw a clip of Mark Zuckerberg say that he fights to protect the as wide open platform for free speech as possible, but actually we see that he actively fights to stifle free speech on this platform.
Yeah, that's of course a very balancing act that he has to walk, Glenn, because at the end of the day, it's a no-win situation for Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, isn't it? We already mentioned if he does go the way of censoring and removing posts, he will certainly alienate a lot of people, half of the US particularly.
I think there is an opportunity for Facebook to win in this crisis here right now. Interestingly, Facebook has boasted about the fact that its artificial intelligence has been able to capture and stop about 89% of hate speech. And yet at the same time, you have its algorithm, which is recommending hate groups. And so the call to have, for example, an independent auditor come in removes this from touching on the political speech, but rather focuses on the major institutional problem, which is to stop hate, to stop bias. And an outside auditor would go to help that fundamental change.
I'm picking up on what Mark Zuckerberg said, Marcus. There's a very fine line to censoring political speech, isn't it? At the end of the day, who tells us what is true and what is not? Who is going to be the judge of this?
Right. So in the past, we could rely on traditional media to sort through all of this, but now, especially here in the United States, we have a large part of the population that doesn't trust in the traditional media anymore. So it's a very difficult discussion to have, and we're at a point where we might look at something and say, well, that's a fact. There might be a huge part of the population that will dispute our claim on that, and so that's going to be very difficult. And I agree with Glenn that if Facebook gets into the realm of moderating the content more strongly and taking down some content, it probably has to be done by an independent entity that is working with Facebook. But on the other hand, they have worked with media companies to actually do this after the 2016 election, and we are still here 4 years later and are discussing the same thing. So that has really not changed the game for them.
It seems like a sheer insurmountable task, Zach. After all, millions of posts, a million of things are being posted daily, perhaps by minute, as we speak right now. You obviously worked on content moderation at Facebook. How does it actually work technically?
Oh, well, certainly for things that aren't automatically dealt with by algorithms, the posts that get reported by people on the platform, if for some reason you see a post, you think it violates the rules, you send a report. Someone like myself would look at it, review the guideline, compare it to the guidelines, see if it violates the guidelines, remove it, leave it up, do whatever it is that we do with it. And I would say that that's essentially how it works. There are auditors for our sites. If we are not making the correct action, of course, the auditors review some of our posts, a selection of our posts, and determine if we did the job correctly. And that's more or less the infrastructure of it.
Glenn, at the end of the day, the argument could be made that Facebook is not the one spreading the hate. It's just the platform. At the end, it is probably just shining a light on the hate that is out there, isn't it?
It's doing more than that. It's amplifying the hatred. And so, as I mentioned before, Facebook has conceded the fact that its algorithm has, in instances, promoted hate groups. And that's where the real problem we're talking about is amplifying hate, amplifying a celebration of violence. And it's something that Facebook must address. And I believe that it will, because the moment of tolerating such behavior is past, and insisting on accountability is now.
The moment to move and the moment to change is now, says Glen Gilmore. Marcus, if we look at Facebook, it is, of course, a company founded by an American and is rooted and based in the United States. But of course, it's an international company. And obviously, you know, hate speech is handled differently in other countries. So while Facebook still remains a global company, that is a bit of a tricky situation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say, you know, freedom of speech has probably elevated to a higher level in the United States within the Constitution. And while it's not absolute, it's a little bit more absolute than in other countries. But I think the experience in other countries, if you, for example, look at some European countries, like, for example, Germany, which passed a hate speech, online hate speech law, and mandated Facebook to moderate and take down content there, the complaint is that Facebook is not doing enough, even when there's a law on the books that's been passed by a parliament.
Zach, some made the argument about the companies that have joined the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, that it's a rather opportunistic, in a sense that companies can actually get better press and better exposure right now from not advertising on Facebook. Is that an argument you follow?
Well, that's an interesting take. I would say that it's not unfounded. Certainly, people have criticized companies for adopting the image and motto of Black Lives Matter, and the image of Pride Month when it suits them, and it seems it's something that everybody else is doing. So I think if they're hopping on a bandwagon, indeed there will be people who will criticize that. I think this is maybe a little bit less. I think probably people would criticize this a little bit less than the other things, but that's certainly one way to look at it.
And this boycott, Glenn, as we understand it, is for 1 month only for the time being anyway. So is this enough to push for real change, or is this just reacting to the moment?
There was a meeting that was just held with the coalition to stop the hate, and they said that they were profoundly disappointed because really none of the recommendations they had were addressed. I think this is a protest that certainly is going to go far beyond July, until there is that institutional change that will bring the transparency and accountability we need to see from Facebook.
And it has already had some impact, at least. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, has met with civil rights leaders, so we but we do understand the meeting didn't really provide any substantial result up until now. He does say, however, that AI is already rooting out 90% of hate speech, and Facebook is teaming up with experts and civil rights groups to develop more tools. Is this, Marcus, enough to satisfy the critics?
I think if we just look at the history and the track record of Facebook, it's not enough. We have not seen real action by Facebook to seriously do something about this. So unless they really do an investment in this and make this a major priority of the company, I'm very skeptical that they will do this on their own. I again agree with Glenn. If the pressure can be held up, and this is certainly now a global movement, then the users will ultimately force Facebook to do something about this.
Zach, Glenn said this is a very critical moment in time. It's very important to be on the right side of history, it seems almost like a no-brainer to stem out and root out hate speech. But you worked at Facebook. Why, explain us perhaps the thinking, the mentality behind the company. Why is it so difficult? Why doesn't Facebook budge and move here?
Well, it's simply two different perspectives on reality, I guess I would say. I think that this move will spell disaster for free speech on the platform. We've seen that their definition of hate speech is rather vague at best and just, frankly disingenuous at worst. I would say that I would be very interested in seeing what exactly hate pages and hate platforms are being amplified. I'm hearing that they're amplifying and promoting these pages. I'd be very interested in seeing exactly which ones are being amplified and exactly why they're hateful. I think that they have a very problematic issue with censoring and removing content that they deem hateful that is obviously not hateful. For instance, the comedian Gavin McInnes is considered a hate figure. The guy is a comedian. He's not exactly very, maybe he's inflammatory, but he's not a hate figure. I think there are a number of people that get removed and deplatformed, and there are all these groups that get deplatformed that are, really they shouldn't be deplatformed. I think there is, as I said, too much censorship and too much removal on the platform as it is, and it's just frankly nothing short of amusing to see people say, no, they're actually not going far enough. Actually, even though they're already informed by the ADL and the SPLC to remove their figures on the hate list and the hate orgs, actually, no, we need them to listen to them more. So I think it's all absurd.
So you're actually saying Facebook is censoring too much as is, rather than too little. Let me ask you this then, Zach. Do you think the criticism directed towards Facebook for not doing enough to stop hate speech is justified?
Well, no, I don't think it's justified. I think it's completely misinformed. I think these perspectives are completely skewed. I think that it's easy to believe that they think that not enough is being done when they think that such innocuous things, everyday things, are considered racist now. So I think these people genuinely believe that there's not enough being done because in their worldview, not enough is being done.
Glenn, what do you say to Zach's remarks that Facebook is actually already censoring already too much and shouldn't go any further, shouldn't budge any further? What do you say to that?
I think there was also a consensus from Zach that there is a bit of mystery as to how it all takes place. Certainly, he had the opportunity to see it hands-on, but also I think we need to have transparency so that everyone can have an opportunity to evaluate, is this being done too much? Is this being done fairly? So that we remove the mystery and have the accountability I think we'd all like to see more of.
What kind of changes would you like to see? What kind of changes would satisfy you, Glenn?
I would like to see a independent audit that's done. I would like to see a permanent civil rights representative. But really, I'm looking for a fundamental change that brings more transparency, so that we can all evaluate and weigh in on whether or not it's straying one way or the other too far, and whether or not it's protecting people as it should from hate and violence.
Marcus, will we look at this ad boycott in hindsight as a turning point, or will this be irrelevant in the long run?
Well, I certainly hope that it could be a turning point. It's long overdue that Facebook pays attention to this. We as a society can't go on like this, and Facebook has a major responsibility here to allow us to get back to a civil discourse in society.
Zach, you already said that the financial damage to Facebook is negligible on the part of Facebook, but do you think it will amount to substantial change, regardless of your personal opinions, whether the boycott is right or wrong?
Do I think it will result in something? Yeah, I certainly think it's possible. I think we saw Twitter in the face of criticism after putting their filter on Donald Trump's posts. They doubled down and got even more bold. So I think that Facebook, although they've tried to put on a face of being pro-free speech, I think it's not entirely impossible that they may also do the same and perhaps expand the scope of what their definition of hate speech is and take down even more people and organizations and pages and be informed by smear merchants like the ADL and SPLC.
Glen, 1 minute left. Could this be a defining year for social media networks general? We spoke about Facebook exclusively today, but generally speaking, hate speech on social media platforms is a problem. Do you think the ad boycott could be the turning point that we've been looking for?
I think even more importantly than the ad boycott is the user base itself. And I think it will ultimately come down to the users insisting and encouraging brands and others to stop the hate and stop the inciting of bigotry and violence.
Well, certainly a story we will continue to follow here. Zach McElroy, Marcus Messner, and Glen Gilmore, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your insights regarding this issue. Thank you out there for watching, and hope to see you again next time when we come back with a new edition of Newsmakers.